As Father Maurice introduced, yeah, my name is Mahon. I'm a convert to Catholicism for the last year, pretty much. So I'm still only a baby, but yeah, no, basically my background is in philosophy. So I studied philosophy as an undergrad, master's, and now I'm doing a PhD in philosophy, particularly in technology ethics. So I do digital ethics. So really, what I do is the ethical issues of social media, what social media and the internet is doing to our brains, basically. And I got interested in this topic in 2020 during lockdown, as I'm sure you all remember, when we were kind of, locked up in individual homes or whatever. The internet was like the portal to the outside world. It was really how we connected to other people, how we talked to them. And yet at the same time, when you looked at, everything was on fire and the world was terrible and everything was falling apart, and it was kind of like, what's going on with this thing? Is it really accurate? When I'd meet up with somebody and talk to them, things were just normal and okay. So it kind of got me thinking, what is this internet thing, and what is it? How is it shaping our perspective on the world and on reality? So that's really what I'm going to talk about tonight. Particularly, I'm going to tell you the history of the internet, if you're interested in such a thing, the digital world, how it came about, and I'm going to tell you what it's doing to us, what's called human downgrading. So how it's changing basically who we are as human beings, and how that's actually part of the company's business model, which is the real danger behind it. I like this idea of angelic warfare, because really when you come to understand how this stuff works, you will realize that you are actually at war with it in some sense. It's adversarial to human beings' well-being. These companies don't have people's best interests at heart, particularly children, unfortunately. So that's what we're going to talk about. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump in. So the history of the internet, it's kind of hard to imagine that the internet is an invention now. I don't know if anybody feels that way, because it's so ubiquitous. It's kind of just everywhere, It's part of your work, it's part of your home life. But there was actually a time before the internet, as I'm sure, some people here remember possibly. The internet is an invention. So the internet began actually in 1969. It was an American military project with academia called the ARPANET, okay? That stands for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. So at the time, a computer looked like this, not very handy. You can't really carry it around with you. It was the size of a whole room, basically. So you'd go into a computer and it'd be this huge thing with a little terminal that you could kind of plug into so one person could work on it at a time. And it wasn't very efficient, so they figured they'd try and link up these computers in different universities, okay? So this was the first internet, basically, was linking up these 4 university computers in America across UCLA, Stanford, UC Santa Barbara, and the University of Utah. And the idea was that if you could send information between them, then somebody could use one computer and log into another one, basically, and it would be more efficient, okay? So the first message ever sent on the internet was from a student programmer called Charlie Klein, and he tried to send the message login, okay? This is what he tried to send to the other computer, but the system crashed. So he only sent the first 2 letters. So the first message ever sent on the internet was lo, as in lo and behold. And that's actually, it's the name of a great documentary on the internet by Werner Herzog. As in, from this very small kind of moment of trying to send this thing to another computer came this whole new digital world, basically, that's changed everybody's lives in the last 30 years. So that's the origins of the internet. Quickly, it became something that people could actually get onto, what's called Web 1.0. Some of you might remember, that dial-up internet noise, the kind of slightly terrifying, but that was this early Web 1.0 that had these kind of web pages that you could go onto. It was built on this structure of the internet. They need these cables, routers, services, so that you have the hardware layer, and then the thing that you could get into was the digital world, or cyberspace, okay? So it took a lot of technology to build something that people could actually, get onto and use, basically. Largely, what we know as the internet came from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who invented web pages and hyperlinks when he was working at CERN in 1989. But basically, this is the first internet, okay? It's like static, read-only web pages that you can go on. They're not really interactive like social media, like you see today. There wasn't really that many issues with this kind of internet. It wasn't like causing as many problems as the internet today is. And there's a reason for that, really. This kind of early internet wasn't connected to advertising, basically. So I don't know if you ever heard of the dot-com bubble. Has anybody heard of this? So in the early 2000s, basically, people realized the internet's going to be like this big thing. So they started pumping loads of money into it, basically. It got really overvalued, and then they tried to take their money back out, and it actually collapsed. People were like, the internet's kind of done for. As we know, that didn't happen. It's still, kind of going. But it collapsed, and all the money was taken out of it. And so when they remade the internet to what's Web 2.0, they had to basically figure out how to make money on it. And this is where I proposed to you the warfare element comes in, because the connection between the advertising and the technology is what makes it adversarial to people's well-being, okay? So if you look at this is a chart of the world's internet users. So in the early kind of 1990s, early 2000s, it was less than 1% of people were actually on the internet. By the end of Web 1.0, it was about 6 or 7%. Now today, it's over 75% of the world's population. So it's even more than it was in 2025, over 6 billion people essentially. And really the time that this changed is in the mid-2010s, which this is where more than 50% of the world's population gets onto the internet pretty much. Also anecdotally, that's the time when things started to get kind of weird. I don't know if anybody thought that, the 2010s. People say that culture really shifted, things started to change a lot. And this is really as we're becoming a digital culture where more people are on the digital world than are off it, basically. So this is a huge, huge change. In like 30 years, the way we communicate with each other, the way we share information, the way we share knowledge, the way we do business has all shifted in this massive change, which is really, I think unprecedented, to be honest, maybe since the printing press. So since Web 1.0, what you get is Web 2.0. That kind of dial-up connection internet that's very slow and cumbersome becomes much faster. You get broadband, you get wireless data, you get smartphones. So computer used to be a huge room that you had to go into. Now we each have a computer in our pocket. We carry a computer around all day with us, and that data that comes from the smartphone is fed to the companies, which helps them to get better at essentially advertising and selling to people. So the Web 2.0 companies, starting out with like Facebook, Google, later Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, all these kind of companies, they solved the business model problem of Web 1.0 through advertising, basically, okay? So the user, like you guys, if you have a social media account, you are not the customer of social media. You might have heard this before. People say, if you don't pay for the product, you are the product. So basically, you don't pay to use social media, so they don't make money from you, they make money from advertisers. Advertisers pay them to influence people's behavior, okay? So that's a great way to think about it. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product, basically. You're the thing that's being sold by the companies. And so, yeah, this technological revolution was obviously very successful. They're now nearly, billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies because they very successfully managed to get so many people onto them, generate so much data, and so much opportunities to kind of influence people's behavior that they became, the default communication thing for people. And a big part of this, because I'm a big fan of the internet. I use the internet myself as well. But part of this revolution now is that everybody can have a channel. I don't know if you know this idea. So in the past, it was like, well, we can talk about it here, but the example I use is in TV channels or newspaper or radio stations, okay? These are called legacy media, like pre-internet media. So like on television, I don't know how many TV channels you had growing up. Maybe somebody didn't even have TV, to be honest, but you had maybe 2 channels, 3 channels, and then you get like 10 channels. Cable TV, you've got like maybe 500 channels or 1,000 channels. Doing pretty well. On YouTube alone now, there's 113.9 million channels, okay? So that's more channels than anybody can ever watch or ever look at, and that's only on YouTube. So if you add like Instagram, you add TikTok, you're now talking about, millions and millions and millions of people's opinions, people's ideas, that by entering the digital world, you're just kind of, going to be exposed to. So it's a very different beast than newspapers, radio, television, the kind of legacy media thing. And it's shifted power from media outlets. So if you think about it, to make a TV show is very expensive. It's quite difficult. You need like a studio, you need actors, you need all this kind of stuff. So when television was the main thing, TV companies had a lot of power. But now if you can make a TV show just with your phone and a social media account, the power now lies with the companies that distribute the content, okay? It's not with the people that are making the content, it's with the social media platforms that are deciding what people see and what people don't see. Aaron Swartz, who's the co-founder of the platform Reddit, said now everyone has a license to speak, so the question is who gets heard. Basically, the companies decide what people see and what people don't see with their algorithms, okay? So this is, again, a very different culture than even the early 2000s. We've really gone through a radical kind of transformation that we haven't caught up to yet. That doesn't make sense. So here's some other content metrics. On YouTube, there's 720,000 hours of video uploaded every day. Facebook, 4 million gigabytes of data. Instagram, 95 million photos and videos. Twitter, 500 million tweets. Blogs, 4.4 million posts. WhatsApp, 65 billion messages. So just the scale of this kind of communication network is just, mind-boggling. It's really beyond anything that's existed before. And by the way, this is also what they're using to train the LLMs. So if you know like ChatGPT or Claude or any of that stuff, the reason they sound like people is because they took all the social media information and then programmed it into them so it could predict what actually sounds like a person. So that all this stuff people created online was then used to make that generation of artificial intelligence. So they're actually connected with each other. But basically, what I'm proposing is that we've moved from really a human culture that's actually, driven by human beings to a culture that's driven by artificial intelligence, essentially. And that this happened in the 2016s, okay? So in the legacy media, content was filtered by human beings. You had somebody at a newspaper that was like an editor that would say, we'll run this story, won't run that story. In television, you had somebody that was like, we're going to make this TV show, we'll make that one. But now, because of the scale of the system, no one person can do that. So what people see and what people don't see online is decided by algorithms. It's decided by artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms. And what the social media companies want the algorithms to do is to keep you watching it, essentially. People have described this as the attention economy business model. Basically, the companies profit from people watching videos that sell them things, or that advertisers can use to sell them things. So this is, we think about social media maybe for kids and stuff, it sounds like, oh, it's social, it's your friends, it's people you hang out with. Really, it's actually more like this kind of advertising, human engineering project that the companies are performing on people. Interestingly, according to Meta's own research, so Meta is the company that formerly Facebook, only 7% of the content people consume is actually from people they know. So it's actually from friends and family. So 93% of the content people consume online is from people they don't actually know now. And that's just from an algorithmic recommendation system. So it's actually not even really social media anymore. It's more just like personalized media that's essentially optimized for addiction. So again, this is kind of a big, information dump, but this is a huge transition culturally. Some people think it means the end of the modern age. It's the equivalent of the printing press. We haven't had something like this before, and so again, we don't have the institutions to deal with it yet. Okay, that's why angelic warfare is important, because parents are kind of the front line of taking care of their children and keeping them, safe in this. So, what is this doing to us? What does this change? How does this affect our humanity? I love this term, human downgrading. Slightly terrifying, obviously, but it comes from this guy called Tristan Harris. Anybody see the Social Dilemma documentary? Yeah? Chris, very good. So Tristan Harris made the Social Dilemma documentary. He also started the Center for Humane Technology. In 2019, he coined this term to describe the cost to our humanity in the current technological environment. Like, it seems like things are getting worse, like things are kind of just degenerating or degrading. And this is what he calls as human downgrading. It seems like it's harder for us to cooperate with each other, to understand each other, to solve problems, to even do basic stuff. And so this is what he means by human downgrading. And I'm going to describe the process of human downgrading for you in kind of 3 steps. Incentives, design, and addiction, okay? I've made this acronym IDA, but it sounds maybe a little bit dodgy. My last one was IDF, which is probably worse. So I need a new acronym if anybody has any ideas. So yeah, the first one, incentives. This is what we've talked about already. This is the business model, okay? Advertising. What happens? What do advertisers want from people? they want them to desire things. They want them to buy things, basically. And Ethan Zuckerman, the guy who invented the pop-up ad, obviously not a very popular guy, he described personal advertising for revenue as the original sin of the internet, basically. That the internet companies needed this money, and so they had to go to the advertisers and integrate them. And even the Google guys like Larry Page, he actually wrote a paper on it saying, if we work with advertisers, it's going to ruin search engines because it's going to bias the search engine. But then he just did it anyway, basically. So the advertising model allows them to give away the platforms for free. Users don't have to pay for them. They make money from the advertisers who pay to influence the users. This creates the incentive that you need to get as many people into your world as possible. You need to have as many people there to generate the data for the advertisers. And you also have to keep them engaging for as long as possible. So if you think about it, if you buy a movie ticket, it doesn't matter how long you watch the movie for. You can go in there and you could face the other way and the company still makes money. Social media doesn't do that. They're not paid by buying a ticket or paying for a good. So they need people watching it all of the time to generate money from the advertisers, which is why it leads to addiction, essentially. Again, the customer is the advertiser, not the user. And the product that social media companies are selling, I love this quote from a guy called Jaron Lanier, who actually invented the idea of virtual reality. He said the product they're selling to advertisers is the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your own behavior and action, or your own behavior and perception. So that's it. Basically, they're trying to nudge you to do something that you wouldn't usually do. That's the product they're selling. And so, yeah, bad incentives and a very successful business model. So internet advertising or digital advertising in the year 2000 was worth about $8 billion. Now it's close to $1 trillion. Okay, so in literally 20, 25, 26 years, it's gone from being a very small industry to a huge industry, okay, putting it on par with oil and gas or real estate. So it's grown massively. They've been very successful at influencing people's behavior is the point of this graph. And sometimes when I saw this, I was trying to think of like, what's the cost of this? You know what I mean? Like if you could see the other side of this graph, like they've increased all this demand and all this, they're making more money, but what cost does this come from? What does this do to people? And I thought of this graph, which was in the Financial Times from a reporter called John Byrne Murdoch, about large-scale studies on personality change in young people, how young people's personalities are changing in the 21st century very rapidly as well. So now, like personality psychology is complicated, but conscientiousness, which is the first one, is if somebody's conscientious, it's the ability to not get distracted and to achieve goals. So you can see that's decreased almost by a whole standard deviation in young people. Okay, neuroticism is negative emotion, so negative emotion is increasing. So you're getting worse at solving goals, you're getting more anxious, you're getting more depressed. Agreeableness is going down, so they're becoming less agreeable, less sociable, and so is extroversion, which is like your, again, sociability. So you're becoming, again, more introverted, more negative emotion, and more issues with achieving goals. This is like an apocalypse graph. Like if you were going to see a graph that's like, that is a really bad graph, it would be this one. This is like, you're going the wrong way in terms of young people's formation, okay? That this is deforming people. I chatted to a guy called Colin DeYoung, who's one of the world's leading personality psychologists. He invented a thing called cybernetic big five personality theory. He's a super brain. But basically I asked him about this graph and said, like, is this legit? And he said it was legit. And he said the only thing that it actually could be is the technology, because it's the only thing that's changed enough in that time frame to do this to people at scale. So, there are real consequences to this industry. Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, called it the greatest loss of human capital ever. This is also from the same article in terms of increasing distraction and carelessness and difficulties making plans. Some people as well connected to the youth mental health crisis that started in the 2010s. It's a very complicated area. If you're interested in it, I recommend Jonathan Haidt's work, The Anxious Generation. But you can see this graph in particular is from a UK mental health study that was over 15 years, so it's a long-term study. And you can see that self-harm in young girls doubled in the period of the 2010s. And that's not a self-report, that's actually hospital admissions, okay? So that wasn't like their perception changed. Basically, they were going to hospital from self-harming at twice the rates that they would have done before. It stayed reasonably stable for boys, but again, you can see a slight increase. You see the same thing with anxiety, with depression and eating disorders, also across them. Social media also disproportionately affects young women, whereas for young boys it's more video games, pornography, those kind of issues. Although it's still not, necessarily good for them. But Jonathan Haidt's prognosis is that in the 2010s, really what changed was this digital culture, and that is what has had this effect on young people. That essentially they were put into this simulation without any, thought about it. So big topic, but again, this is, I'm trying to give you the big picture here so you can see, what's going on. So why would this happen? Why would this technology that seems kind of innocuous do this to us? And if you're interested in this sort of thing, there's a great book called Hooked. It's kind of disturbing. I found it very disturbing to read, to be honest, because he's kind of giving you advice on how to manipulate people, essentially. It's a field called persuasive design, which is, it's basically how to get people hooked on your products, how to build habits in people. And so he argues the value of the social media company is in linking their services to the user's daily routines and emotions. In other words, to form a habit. He defines habits as automatic behaviors triggered by situational cues that we do with little to no conscious thought. So you've all probably had this experience of like you're walking along and suddenly you're looking at your phone, you're going, why am I looking at my phone right now? That's actually designed into the technology. That's what they're trying to do basically, is to get you in order to, without thinking about it, you walk in the door, you pick up your phone, you go on your phone, and you don't ever pay attention to it. That's it. And next thing you know, you're on TikTok and half an hour or an hour has gone by and that's it. That's actually not an accident. That's part of their conscious design strategy, okay? And so there's two ways that they can do this. There's external triggers. An external trigger is like your phone beeps or it buzzes, you get a notification from somebody. That's all right, but most people turn off those notifications, maybe don't pay attention to them. So really what they want is internal triggers. Internal triggers, a lot scarier, which is that essentially your own emotions become a trigger for use, okay? So if you feel bored, boredom activates opening Instagram to fix it. You feel lonely, you go on Snapchat, okay? You feel bad about yourself, you go argue with people on Facebook. Something like that. Basically, they want to link your self-regulation to the use of the platform as a way of soothing it, okay? And this is the basis of addiction. A person who's an alcoholic will, when they experience negative emotions, will feel the urge to drink in order to resolve the negative emotion. That's it. And then you get caught in this cycle whereby you drink to relieve the negative emotion, and then your life goes off the rails, maybe you alienate family members, so you get a lot more negative emotion, so then you drink even more, and then you get caught in this vicious cycle. But that's actually what they're trying to do with these products, which is, that alone should probably be illegal, to be honest. But they go through these 4 steps in this model, which I have a graph for, which is that they want to use the trigger, which is the external action. They want to get you to do something, and then they give you a reward for it. So you'll get a nice video, a nice, comment, a nice something to look at. And then they want you to invest, they want you to like, they want you to comment, they want you to add it to your profile. And that builds this habit loop. And where they learned it from is behaviorist experiments on rats in the 20th century. So people describe social media as the largest unregulated social science experiment ever, because they've taken a lot of this stuff from B.F. Skinner. I don't know if any of you know who B.F. Skinner is. He's a psychologist who would do experiments on rats and animals where he would train them to solve puzzles and do all these crazy things. He could have pigeons to do mazes and solve all sorts of stuff just by rewarding them when they did what he wanted and punishing them when they didn't. So he would shock them, or he would not feed them, or he would, do some other negative stimuli. And then if they did something good, they would get food. And over time, what happens then is that the animal is trained to expect the actions that give them food and to expect the actions that hurt them, okay? So they start to behave in ways without needing to do anything to them. They behave in ways to get the reward and avoid the punishment, you know what I mean? And this is exactly what social media have done with their platforms, essentially, is that they give you rewards for things. When you go on, if you post, you get likes, you get shared, you go viral, and then you spend more time on the app, essentially, which is what they want. So a person who's like an influencer or a content creator that spends all of their time on social media, which I do as well. I do content online, but for social media companies, they basically want you online making content for people to get other people to stay online for as long as possible. And that's like their ideal customer pretty much. So really they just want everybody to be on there all the time, 24/7, which obviously, as you can imagine, isn't very good for your life in general, you know. And this brings us to the third thing we're going to talk about, which is addiction, which is dark flow. Anybody ever hear of flow states? Yeah, flow states. Yeah, okay. It's kind of a popular topic at the moment. A flow state is like a highly rewarding state of optimal experience. So people will often experience it in sports. Maybe it's called like being in the zone. Like I use the example of skiing a lot. If you're skiing on a ski slope and it's like perfectly the amount that you want to go, you're at like the right angle, you're completely focused, you know, you're not thinking about your lunch or what you're going to do tomorrow. You're just like locked in. That's a flow state. Ooh, sorry, that was not very good. That's a flow state. So you're optimally kind of placed. Your attention is completely engaged in it, okay? And what the companies are trying to do is they're trying to get you into that feeling of flow. They're trying to get you to be completely paying attention. It's called normative dissociation. So basically, if you're in that flow state and you're completely concentrated, you're not thinking, is this a good thing to be doing? Or should I be doing this? Or is there something else I should be doing? Sometimes in the literature they say human judgment is treated as a problem to be solved by engineering. So they're trying to engineer so that your judgment doesn't come online, basically. And so the thing about flow states is, again with the skiing example, if I'm on a ski slope that's like, you know, vertical, I'm going off the edge of a cliff, I'm going to get anxious and I'm not going to be in a flow state anymore. Or if I'm on a really boring kind of just flat one, and it's like, all right, this isn't great, I'm also not going to get in a flow state. So you have to be optimally challenged. You have to be between kind of anxiety and boredom to be right at that edge of your kind of ability. And so how they do that is just by constantly feeding you with novelty. They just have this infinite amount of content that they can just serve up basically to any person at any one time. And the result of this, of getting into these flow states, which is driven by dopamine, which is it's the molecule of motivation and pursuit, but it's also the basis of every addiction. So any addiction is driven by dopamine because it feels good. And so when you're in this highly rewarding state, you're getting fitted to the technology, okay? So like a person who's skiing that's in the zone is learning how to ski really well. When you're in the digital world and you're surfing through all these things, you're learning how to surf this really well. But in doing that, it's fitting you more and more to that digital world, okay? You're getting better in the digital world, but that comes at the cost of the non-digital world. So when you go back to the non-digital world, you experience anti-flow, okay? Anti-flow is like anxiety, depression, burnout, okay? If anybody plays video games, I don't know if there's a big video game audience, but people who get really into video games, you could get really, really good at Call of Duty or something, and you're amazing in Call of Duty, and then you go outside and you're just like fumbling around and you can't even, you know, you're kind of half blind and can't do anything. It's like, yeah, you've optimized for this simulation basically, and now in the real world, you're not going to perform as well, basically. But this is, I mean, it's kind of a funny thing, but this is the start of a lot of those bad feedback loops that we talked about, like the alcoholic who starts drinking and creates problems and then has more negative emotions and so drinks more to fix it and gets caught in this problem. A young person who spends a lot of time in the digital world, say socializing in the digital world where they can message people, they can contact them, they don't have to do face-to-face interaction, will get social anxiety. So in normal face-to-face interactions, it's too uncertain, and so it becomes more difficult because you're used to communicating in a very controlled way, okay? And then you get social anxiety, so you stop socializing with people in real life, you spend more time in the digital world, which in turn makes your social anxiety worse, and then you spend more time in the digital world, and then you're having panic attacks and anxiety and you can't function anymore. So this thing seems innocuous, but it can be the start of a lot of bad cycles for young people. And unfortunately, young people, particularly younger, I mean, for adults, you know, it works on me, and I'm a social media researcher. So particularly for younger people, it's like they don't have the tools or the skill set to deal with this stuff. So it's like you got to just, you know, intercede with them. But I'll give you a kind of mythological metaphor to sum up the whole thing. Any Hansel and Gretel fans here? No? Anybody big on Hansel and Gretel? It's a classic. If anybody doesn't know the story of Hansel and Gretel anyway, so there's two parents, there's a father and a mother, and they've got two kids, Hansel and Gretel, but then the mother dies, okay? And the mother dies and the father remarries, and you know, spoiler, he remarries an evil stepmother, okay? happens often enough. Evil stepmother, the family's running out of food, okay, so there's a famine in the land. They're running out of food, and the evil stepmother kind of says, well, you know, those kids eat a lot of food. We could just get rid of them. The dad's like, oh, no, I can't. I couldn't do it. But she kind of works on him, and eventually goes, all right, yeah, we'll leave the kids in the woods, basically, and we'll have a bit more food. And so they go and they leave the kids in the woods, and they abandon them. The kids get lost. And the kids are wandering in the woods. Anybody know what they find in the woods? A house made of sweets, a gingerbread house. And I mean, pretty good if you're hungry in the woods and you find a house made of sweets. Like, jackpot. Like, that's pretty, a good result. As good as it gets, really. And so these kids are wandering and they find a house made of candy that's delicious. And so they start nibbling on the house. And then the witch comes out and says, who's nibbling on my house? And gets the kids, and they bring them in, and she's just feeding them with tons and tons of candy. And anybody know what she's going to do to them when she feeds them up with candy? She's fattening the calf, exactly, yeah. She's fattening them up to eat them. So not such a nice witch. So we can think about social media pretty much I think, pretty effectively this way. People are wandering in the kind of uncertainty in the modern world. The digital world offers this tempting candy house that's perfectly calibrated to your every desire and expectation. It predicts what you want before you need it. You only need to swipe your fingers and you can get everything. It's free, it costs nothing. Digital actually means fingerish, if you think about it, just your fingers. So there's no cost to just flicking and swiping, and that's it. And you can stay there forever, and there's no charge. But the problem is, over time, the more time you spend in the digital world, the more you get used to it, the more difficult it is to return to the non-digital world, the imperfect world, the flawed world, the world filled with friction and difficulty. And so what do? They spend more time in the candy house, going to the candy house. But the problem is this fattens them up and it makes it harder and harder to leave. The user becomes stuck or trapped in this cycle of regulating their emotions with the use of the platform, which is available 24/7 for free in one's pocket. So getting addicted to this, and I mean, as I pointed out earlier, we all have a computer in our pockets all the time. So even say somebody that's addicted to cocaine or something, at least there's kind of a distance between them and the drug. It's like, for a young person that's addicted to this, it's like having an endless supply of cocaine in your pocket, essentially. And so they don't have the regulation. But the point is, that this world that has been built has this nefarious agenda. Anybody know what witches like? What was the witch kind of... Anybody remember when they kill the witch, what happens? No? Yeah, well, after. But they kill the witch and they find out she's been hoarding gold under the floorboards, because witches love gold. So the witch has all this money, and then they find the money and they bring the money back to the family, and the evil stepmother has died, and now, they can all live in peace. And they've got enough money. But the social media companies are hoarding gold, and they're hoarding it at the expense of people's development, of people's formation, in a way that's harmful for them. And that kind of brings us into this conclusion, really, which is that for digital media and the family, the smartphone is a very powerful tool. It's a portal to these companies, to these technologies, to this whole digital world, essentially. And I think we should be very careful about giving what comes through this portal access to young people's minds. And I think you should delay it, really, for as long as possible, until they've had time to form as people, really. The digital world is an adversarial environment. You can read this actually online. The state of Nebraska was suing TikTok, and so revealed a load of TikTok's internal documents that they weren't going to obviously show to people. And they found out that TikTok's user base is disproportionately made of children, which they described as a golden audience. And they summarized that by engagement metrics, as expected, the younger the user, the better their performance. So essentially, they know younger users are better for their business model because they can't stop looking at it, and they are actively targeting them as the audience that they want to go for. Meta in 2019 ran a program called Project Mercury, where they showed that people who stopped using Facebook reported lower feelings of depression, anxiety, loneliness, social comparison, and then they just buried the results of this as well. Also, the whistleblower Frances Haugen showed that Facebook ran an experiment to show how they were giving young girls eating disorders. So the young girl would get recommended dieting content, exercise content, and then that would go to bulimia and anorexia content. And they showed that this was happening with their algorithm, and then they just buried it as well. And in 2024, they launched Instagram for teens. So, you know, you can kind of see they're pretty amoral. They don't really care, you know. And so if we're expecting the companies to care about people despite all their talk of, oh, it's safe, oh, it's this, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like smoking companies being like, yeah, it's great for kids. They're, you know, low nicotine or something like that. You know, you can't trust the companies essentially. And unfortunately, the regulation is also very slow. Obviously, I do technology ethics. There's a saying kind of in technology ethics that before a technology is released, you don't know what the harm is going to be. And by the time it's released and everybody is using it, it's too late to do anything about it. So unfortunately, when it's already out and we realize all these things, then the government is nearly powerless to do anything. They're working on it in terms of delaying it, but you know, again, I'm trying to emphasize why angelic warfare is so important, that real people, parents, families are actually the front line of protecting their kids and schools as well, and religious communities. And as you've probably heard as well, a lot of these companies don't allow their own children on them, very famously. Bill Gates banned his children from having cell phones, limited their screen time. Steve Jobs sent his children to Waldorf schools where they don't allow technology. Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, banned his son from having a cell phone or watching TV. So they know, I mean, they make these things. They know what they do. They know why you shouldn't be on them as a kid. And unfortunately, there's been recently some very disturbing stories. I don't know if you heard about the Molly Russell inquest, who was a schoolgirl of 14 who died by self-harm, who took her own life, which was identified as and that, you know, from the harmful content, and they actually wouldn't even label it as a suicide because they thought there was so much, she was so influenced by things online that it was actually potentially, you know, a case of manslaughter or something more serious. So these kind of cases are bringing to the forefront now, people being like, okay, something's wrong, but we're not really there yet in terms of the public response. So that's why it's so important, again, to emphasize, you know, people to take responsibility around this. And there was a landmark trial recently where Meta and YouTube were defeated by a young girl named Callie, who was watching, you know, YouTube and Instagram 6-7 hours a day. I know I actually work with a company who's a digital health company that deals with young people with social media addiction, where screen time is something 7 hours a day. So that's essentially all they do, pretty much. And they can't get out of it. And it's very seriously, you know, impacts their lives. And so hopefully, I mean, trials like this means the companies are responsible and they might have to start caring about what they're doing to protect their financial bottom line, because that's all they're interested in. But again, it's a slow process. And so things like the angelic warfare are an amazing in-between point to kind of protect people to take responsibility for these things. So kind of in conclusion, yeah, the digital world, it's an adversarial environment. There's great stuff there, but you need a certain level of formation. You need a certain level of sophistication to engage with it that young people don't have yet. Unfortunately, the digital world is going to get worse because as more people leave it, the companies are going to turn up the pressure to try and get more people on it. So they're going to try and make it more addictive rather than less addictive, would be my prediction. And so, again, it's just so important to keep young people off it. And I've already kind of explained this stuff, but also, and I mean, sometimes the sacrifice is not just what they're doing online, but what they're doing offline. There was a young boy interviewed actually with the UK social media ban, and they kind of said to him like, oh, are you happy about the social media ban? He's like, no, my life's over. What am I going to do? And then they were like, well, what do you think you'll do on like a Saturday afternoon or whatever? He's like, I'll probably go play football with my friends. I was like, that sounds pretty good. Like, you know what I mean? It could be worse. Like, you know, so I think finding other things to do that get you into those flow states, sports, socializing, relationships, you know, religious, spiritual practices, like really engaging with life. And this, I think, that as bad as this kind of system is, it's also an opportunity for us to really return to real values and start to practice things that are actually positive and take formation seriously for young people. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.